Let's see.
All right, we're on, you can hear me? All right. So when the call for papers came out this year, I had just been talking to my faculty about looking for an AI policy. So the timing of this comes all together. So I'm Susan Kern, I'm director of the Historic Preservation Program at University of Maryland, which is in the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. We're a graduate program and one of 5 programs in the school. And I should mention, I want to mention here that the only AI-generated piece of this is I asked AI, does AI have a face when I was looking for a title? And it said it has an interface. I thought, okay, we'll do that. And a picture I took in New York this summer. So, okay, so my goal in even beginning this is to develop guidelines for our program to use with consistency so that faculty and students have a common understanding about what's acceptable use of AI in our program. I have a smallish faculty where we have 4 full-time people and then a group of adjuncts. The adjuncts are professionals in the field who come in and teach 1 course a semester. They're not part of the university extended learning system. They're not the ones going to workshops with our technology people, etc. So we needed to create some guidelines for this. When I began this, I was working on this continuum that AI is either a cheap parlor trick, and that's my cat in a parlor, or it's the end of the world as we know it, right? That's the sort of the range of conversations here. As I worked on this project a little more, there's actually a lot more complexity here, and I think our responsibility as educators is somewhere in between that. So in June this year, I met with our technical advisory board. So each program in the architecture school at Maryland has a board of professionals who give us advice. And it was in meeting with them that they had particular interest in us taking on AI as a question for the field for 2 reasons. One is that universities have resources that our partners don't necessarily have. So a lot of our alumni who are on this board are independent contractors. They have small CRM firms. They do work, and they're not going to be investing in a new software package that they don't know what it's going to do for them, right? And they don't have access to university resources. We do, right? We've got a playground. So they kind of wanted us to take this on, and I'll talk more about that. So there's an analogy here, I think, to where social media was about 20 years ago or so, where people my age, even half my age, but people who are professionals in the field who don't have time to learn a new skill think that the people who are going to change the world for them are the people coming out of educational programs, and they're going to be native to 20 years ago social media, and they're going to take these new museum jobs. They're going to come into these nonprofits, they're going to come into small CRM firms, and they're going to do all the social media because young people know how to do that. And my technical advisory committee was giving me that same read about AI, that there's this expectation that it's the people coming out of our programs that are either going to defend them from AI or are going to lead them into how to use these tools, because they're in positions with ongoing work. They don't have the time or resources to learn how to do it, right? So that's what made me rethink what is our educational role here. And I had just Googled National Trust Social, and the Instagram and the, Facebook pages and all of this stuff. And any of you who are teaching circa, in the early 2000s, right, were probably at a university that said, we're going to give every college professor web server space for a Facebook page because we're getting all these hits from it, and there were a whole lot of us that said, I don't have time to make a Facebook page for my own research. It's not what I want to do with my time, and some of us escape that, and some people really enjoy it, right? But and I feel like we're at a similar place with AI. So I came up with a group of concerns here, a group of kind of talking points that I've grouped as scholarship, preservation work, and ethics, that are the concerns that both my technical advisory board and my faculty and students have expressed in what are our questions here. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of those. So in terms of scholarship, right, there's one end of the range here that says AI is a tool like any other, right? It's like spell check. You use it to help you do some things, and that's all it is. The other end of that conversation is that AI is not a representation of individual work, and that any use of it's in violation of academic standards. And I have at least one faculty member on my team who says, no, we need to cancel any of this. The University of Maryland has created, we have a TLTC, our Technical Learning and Transformation Center, has challenged us that in writing these AI statements, we need to identify the educational purpose of AI, if we're going to use it or not use it. We need to acknowledge the role of data privacy. So, if we're playing with AI, you shouldn't be using your student roster, because, especially if you're using an external AI server, because it's populating the web with all your information, right? And then this is something for those of us who do community engaged work, right? Of thinking about with those community partners who share this role with us. Verifying content generation, right? It's really fun to, do the cheap parlor tricks with AI, and they spew all sorts of hilarious things, right? But it also means that there's lots of verification that if you're using AI, it needs to do. And then citing the content of AI. So the other text here is my colleague who runs the PhD program in the architecture school here in Milwaukee, worked with his graduate students last year to come up with a compact for their class. And decided that, this is not a pointer, sorry there. Is this a pointer?
It is a pointer,
okay.
It was not showing on the TV.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so I'm more used to doing it this way anyway. What they decided that AI use is okay with acknowledgement for exploratory or preliminary questions, for developing topics and questions about topics, for developing lists of readings, for summarizing and outlining sources, as basic tools for writing, editing, translation, transcription, cleaning up data. That's the one place where my graduate students say AI is your friend, right? Is for cleaning up your data. Just yesterday, New York Times story, I think it was New York Times, maybe it was Gizmodo, but on Apple has just come out with a new set of earbuds that will do real-time translation. That's really exciting, right? What this same team of PhD students decided was that AI may not be used to produce final reports, it may not be used to produce essays, and certainly not dissertation material, right? So what is this range, right? That's what the conversation's about. Okay, so the bottom line here in terms of scholarship remains the same, that a scholar is responsible for the entire content of whatever work we produce, including your sources, your images, your drawings, your writing, your data, your analysis, etc. And citing your sources and your tools has to be part of what we do. Okay, so then we get to this question of preservation work. So part of this challenge is then, is AI appropriate for some parts of the work we do and not for other parts of the work we do, in which case we need to define where AI is acceptable and where it's not. Another point here is that maybe these choices about what we do with AI are not actually ours, that maybe it's the expectations of our industry partners who will hire our students, and that in fact it's not our call, that we need to watch where the field is going and respond to that, right? As Carrie's talk just indicated, right? There's this back and forth between our educational missions and the standards of our professions. So I was working with someone at our teaching and learning center, a woman named Luisa Nkrumah, And she said, so what do you do in historic preservation? So all of the things highlighted in yellow here are the lists that I gave her. I said, okay, we do technical writing, and sometimes that writing is technical, sometimes it's for a public audience, sometimes we do specialized kinds of writing about buildings, archaeological sites, artifact collections, paint samples. I was trying to give her a range of, what are the things we do. Software skills of data presentation, report production, technical skills like GIS, CAD, etc. We do professional and in community engagement. We do documentation, photography, measuring, drawing, spatial and condition analysis. We do research in archives, maps, graphics, etc., and we do budget and finance work. So what she responded with were the things that are not highlighted. Well, here's some things that AI could possibly do in each of these categories. And when I first looked at it, I thought, well, most of that is not something I'm going to farm out to a bot somewhere, right? Most of this is not something that I'm interested in having somebody else do for me, something else do for me. Maybe organizing my photo collections is the one thing that I would like to have automated. And when I first saw condition reports on here, I was a little bit horrified, but actually what it says is the structure for condition reports. So she's not saying AI is going to do a condition report for us. She's going to say it might advise you on, putting an introduction and an overview, an executive summary, and a conclusion. So really looking at this, there's not much here that's very scary to me in terms of what we do. And then there are things like summarizing archival sources, right? For AI to be useful for archival sources, those archival sources have to already exist in the digital world. And if those archival sources don't exist in the digital world, then AI is useless, right? So we still have to train in going to the archives that have the records that we're going to use, and we have to be the people that use them. And sure, maybe we'll scan them and turn them into some kind of data, and then maybe AI will be some sort of tool in organizing that data, but so what? All right, so I didn't find this particularly frightening, although some of my faculty did. And then I started thinking about the university resources. So at University of Maryland, we have our own internal AI. It's called TURP AI. TURP is a turtle thing. But we have an AI platform that was created by the university so that we can explore what AI does without our exploration going out to the broader, to the whole universe, right? So any of the work we do in TURP AI stays within the university servers. It's not part of the network. But, as someone at University of Maryland, I have access to all of, both all the free AI that's out there, but also the paid versions of, Adobe or enterprise licenses to ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot, and all of these other things, right? So if I want to play with these, it's completely free for me. And I think this is one of the things that our industry partners were challenging us to think about, right? Is what can you tell us about the capabilities of these tools that we're not going to be able to learn? But then the other component of this, right, is for any of us that do community engaged work, is this issue of equity. And if we train our students to start working on platforms that other people don't have access to, then we're not creating tools that are going to serve the people that we're working with. So it's not just about, that the university, that we can do this specialized work. We also have to be aware of who that work is going to serve, when we're done, while we're doing it, and when we're done with it. And we already have long-standing town and gown issues, as every university does. But if we cut our community partners off because we're using software that they could never get to, then we're not doing the work we need to do. So, all right, and then there's this kind of work, right? So this is a team of students earlier this year documenting this tiny little tenant house on the eastern shore of Maryland in Queen Anne's County. And this is the kind of work that AI is never going to take away from us, right? It's this field work, this going out, drawing and observing the details of a building, the imprint of human habitation in a space, that we want to document and understand. You know, and this was a lesson for me in why would you draw? Why would you do a measured drawing of a balloon frame building, right? But in fact, you know, in studying this tiny one-room building, 266 square feet, that people had tried to improve by putting in a little partition and making it into a single room into 2 rooms, 2 tiny little rooms. You know, but this building had all sorts of structural issues. And in measuring it, we discovered, in fact, that a balloon frame building can have secrets too. And the spacing of the joist was off in the roof framing, which meant that the rafters were off, so the joists were off. So even at first build, they had to scab pieces of other building material to the joist just to get the thing laughed and plastered, right? And that's a story that I'm not going to see from a scan. That's not a story I'm going to see from a process that doesn't take me into that building saying, where are the problems here? Why doesn't the math on this work, right? You know, that's the exciting reason we do this work. So then there's a couple ethical considerations about AI. And you know, I was a little surprised that some of my students were horrified that they were even being invited to consider how AI might have a role in their education. You know, and the largest one certainly is AI's impact on natural and historic resources, right? You know, these are ethical considerations that people are saying, you know, this outweighs any consideration of using it. And certainly I have colleagues who are doing CRM work now, you know, on the sites where these big data farms are being set, or who are part of regional and community, regional and state activism to try and prevent data farms from being located on rural land. And then there's this, you know, this other challenge here, another ethical, is the commodification by large corporations that might decide how they want this work, how they want AI to work for us, instead of me being able to say, you know, in my discipline, I need this tool to do this, 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 this. So, you know, so Michael Kern, the Washington Post, and I'm in Maryland, which is adjacent to Virginia. I actually live in Virginia, vote in Virginia. Virginia is home, I think 70% of the global data center data goes through Northern Virginia, right? You know, these data farms are a huge issue in Virginia. You know, and Michael Kern, the Washington Post, who writes on nature and economics, you know, this piece, ChatGPT is an energy guzzler. These things you're doing are worse. You know, and he measured things like the emissions of producing a hamburger, which is more than 600 times the emissions of you know, a simple query in AI. But you know, then he got into the commodification of AI by these large corporations that is going to be reducing the options for how we use these services. And you know, if any of you have a phone, right, every time you get an update, you have to figure out how to escape the way the new update wants you to use the AI, right? You know, a lovely, in case you can't read can everybody read the caption on this New Yorker cartoon? You know, ChatGPT, why is my electric bill so high? Says the guy living next to the data farm. You know, Northern Virginia is already impacted by you know, urbanization, low-density residences like this, other development. You know, and we can find lots of these pictures of these huge data centers going up, you know, either adjacent to, you know, existing houses, sometimes new development like that, sometimes older development, sometimes places where people of limited economic means live, you know, and putting stresses on the water, on the energy, et cetera. You know, and the American Farmland Trust, National Trust, Piedmont Environmental Council, American Battlefield Trust have all protested what's going on right now in Virginia. You know, and this is a data center alley, you know, which, you know, about 51 million square feet of existing data centers. That's going to more than double in the next decade or so. So you can find lots of these stories out there, and not just for Virginia, but these certainly illustrate the problem. So coming back to the role of this in education, I'm not particularly concerned about the academic use of AI in the work we do, right? I think that's actually really creating agreements with our students and policies for what's acceptable and not acceptable use of these tools is analogous to other tools that we have had to make adjustments for. Nothing's going to replace the role of getting students onto sites, whether it's a slave quarter like this one from the 1850s in Maryland, or a site like the McMillan Reservoir, an adaptive reuse project in Washington, D.C. that opened within the last 12 months. And so AI is not going to replace any of that. The magic of imagining what a site could be if you think about it differently, or trying to understand, the circumstances of living in a space where you have very few choices about privacy, about heat, about light, about access. What our partners need from us is for our students to be conversant in these academic preservation and ethical challenges, and universities, particularly like mine, have the resources to set students up to do that, right? And so I'm a little bit surprised that when I started this conversation last spring, that this is my takeaway, that universities have a role and a resource in doing this work. It's much like this roof from this 1783 chapel in Maryland, where the new structure here is obvious, the I-beams, and then if we start looking more closely, we can see all the individual solutions and choices that had to be made for leaving a record of changes at this site, so this building is still standing, right? And I would challenge us to approach AI the same way, right? We've got ethical considerations, we've got real preservation issues, and then we've got our academic resources. So, thank you.
Questions, comments from students? What are your thoughts? Your question of back row.
So one of the things that the part that you say that how much we should let the student use AI in the school, I was thinking it's kind of, it looks like if the example can make it easier, if we have a body of water and the body of water became find a way to the sea, it needs to be free and find a way by itself. And in the several years, it's make a river and go to the shape and go to the sea. For this, I guess it's better to be less school, like a period, like 4 years, 5 years. I don't know. It should done by research. Let all of students, also faculty members, use AI for a period of time. After that, I think the policy will be kind of shaped very organically, and we will realize how much we should use AI.
We should use or not use, right? No, I think you're absolutely right. And this is a moment, probably if I revisited this a year from now, or certainly like, Carrie did, 20 years from now, right? It's going to be a completely different conversation, just like social media, or just like doing, using Google to figure out, where do I start this research project? And that's part of the argument, right, is that when you're at a university, you have these resources that our partners in the field don't have. My colleagues in the architecture program at the University of Maryland are working on AI and design thinking, and are doing much more robust engagement with how can AI supplement and inform the design work that we do in studio. Preservation work tends to be a little more traditional because what we have to produce is traditional. And so I agree with you, right? The the point is to explore now, but it is also our job as educators to create, to make sure that the work that happens in our academic programs meets defensible academic standards, right? So we want your exciting ideas, but we also have to make sure, you know, if this says a report that goes to the library in this format, it's got to be in that format, right, to go to the library. Yeah, Carrie.
Just a comment. So about 2 or 3 years ago, one of our state preservation organizations had a conference, and I purposely, not that I know anything about AI or not much, I purposely asked SPO folks, representatives from a lot of different private practitioners, just to say, how do you think we're going to use this, from the visual side to the text to whatever, and all coming down to, we've all had the cat parlor trick thing happen. I thought it was really interesting that as a SPO was talking about it, she literally asked, I think, ChatGPT about show me something with salmon going upriver. And it literally showed packets of salmon from the grocery store, about 12 or 15 of them in a river.
Yeah.
And so just this idea that might be what happened a couple of years ago. But as visual recognition's coming through and whatever, you know, so a lot of the people that were doing condition assessment reports were like, well, we could see it actually helping much more on the visual inventory, that kind of stuff, like different built features, et cetera, but again, they were like making the choices, making the decisions, no. Definitely helping us in the process, possibly.
Yeah.
There's a question back here.
It's just a quick comment. It's interesting that you had brought up the data centers because I believe it was just last month that a large data center in Port Washington, so just about 30 minutes north of here, was approved for in a residential neighborhood, and that made pretty big news in Wisconsin of just building this large data center. I can't remember exactly the square footage off the top of my head, but a lot of people that live nearby were not happy about it, so it was interesting that you brought that up.
Well, and you know, it is one of the biggest preservation issues. And you know, the site of some of these data centers, Prince William County, Virginia, you know, is where the history community ran Disney out of, you know, in the 1990s, Disney wanted to build a history theme park in Northern Virginia, you know, and that was run out of there. As you know, this isn't the way battlefields and farmland get repurposed. And, you know, a similar conversation now.
One of the problems I see is if you start letting AI in, which could be a good tool, how do you police not crossing the line? Because it's one thing to say, AI, help me research XYZ versus AI, write me a paper on XYZ. So how do you police that?
I trust my graduate students to be responsible for the work they turn in. However, one of my colleagues who teaches a large undergraduate section, and in fact, you know, and this is a fact, right? Sales of blue books are up, right? Because faculty who teach anything that's written work, you know, are requiring their students to turn in a physical handwritten document of their work. And so my colleague who teaches undergraduates is using blue books for his exams. You know, but I think that's part of what we have to do as people who are training graduate students to be professionals is you are responsible for all of this work. There actually aren't shortcuts if you want to be a successful and respected professional in this field. You know, we probably all have, you know, stories of people who went rogue, but yeah, that's another challenge. And right now, AI cannot detect AI in surveying its own materials. So, yeah, fun.
I'll just make a quick comment, because I'm kind of investigating some of this stuff too. I don't know where I stand because it's just happening so quickly. But one of the things that I'm interested in is the fact that AI, we should be specific on what we're talking about AI. That's the other thing we're having conversations with at the university level. What are we talking about? Is how it can recognize patterns very, very well. And when we're looking at district level, maybe interventions with infill design, some of the kind of experiments we've done have been really interesting because you could pack it full of a lot of local data kind of the local DNA of maybe a specific downtown or neighborhood. And it's producing some conceptual images that are really kind of integrated well. And so there's some positive, even though there's this unknown in terms of the educational piece.